According to many economists, Saskatchewan's economy is predicted to lead Canada in growth this year, fueled mainly by rising commodity prices. We're back with Saskatchewan's Premier Brad Wall to talk about how his province can avoid the boom and bust cycles that have befallen other commodity-dependent provinces. And Premier, thanks for sticking with us. I'm an Albertan. I've been around long enough to see a lot of these boom and bust phases. Each time we go into the boom phase, we say this time it's different. And it hasn't been, at least not yet. How can you take your province into an era of sustainability? How can you smooth out those rises and falls? Well,
there's been now some sustained growth, certainly in the province of Saskatchewan, and we weathered the recession quite nicely. We weren't immune to it, but actually we set an employment record for our province in the middle of it in August of '09, and so we've seen some sustainability, but for the long term, this is a priority for our government, to try to work with industry and map out a plan to at least ease that cycle a little bit and point to more sustainable growth. And for our province, we think that's building on our strength as a resource and an agricultural powerhouse in the world. What we mean by that is we have an innovation agenda within the government of Saskatchewan. We spoke about it before the break, a part of it anyway. We know we have a lot of coal. We know we have carbon capture expertise. So let's build on that in terms of the next economy by proceeding with and you pointed out there's some challenges with the technology, but let's invest in the technology for clean coal. Because we know if we do that, we're going to be able to create jobs tomorrow and into the future in the knowledge economy and the innovation economy as the rest of the world's interested in the technology. The same is true for uranium. We mined 20% of the world's uranium last year. Let's add some value to it in terms of research and development. We've launched a new uranium research initiative at the University of Saskatchewan. We want to reclaim Saskatchewan's leadership position in nuclear medicine. We want to take a look at the potential of small reactor technology at the research level. And in the case of in agriculture, we want to build on the strength of the province of Saskatchewan as an agriculture producer by investing on the innovation side in terms of biotechnology, where we have about a third of Canada's biotechnology community, principally at the U of S. So that's the vision. We have resource strength today. Let's invest the dividends of that to keep our economy competitive, to keep taxes low, to balance the budget, to invest in infrastructure. And for tomorrow, let's use the dividends of resource growth to invest in innovation in the next economy.
What about diversification? Because again, the money that you're putting into innovation is innovation in resource-based industries. Right. And again, you can afford those jobs now because the price of the underlying commodities are in fact strong. So while it's innovation in the fields that you're already strong in. What about the diversification?
Well, that's actually precisely the point. Well, I would argue that is diversifying. That's not just relying on the resource itself or the agricultural production itself. The diversification comes when we add new jobs, innovating on the platform of that resource foundation. I actually think resource economies perhaps make a mistake when governments start to tinker and say, we've got to diversify away from this, so we should build cars here. I mean, that's maybe that's an out there example, but not that far off. We've had governments who have engaged in picking in winners and losers in the name of diversification into sectors that aren't the strength of that economy. We have a different view. We are saying we have this resource strength, uranium, oil, potash, agriculture. Let's build on that. Let's create jobs for tomorrow that are less dependent on the cycle, on the price, but are still very much a part of that strength, that foundation of our economy, the resources.
Now, a lot of that's long-term planning, but over the short term, a lot of those commodities you mentioned, the pricing is totally out of your hands, whether it's a earthquake in Japan or whether it's a slowdown in Europe. How do you deal with that in terms of your own thinking? And are you ever worried about how the speculator has, in fact, enhanced the pricing of some of those commodities that are so important to Saskatchewan?
The short answer is yes. That's a concern for government. It's a concern for us. And so we try to build a lot of caution into our budgeting as a government. We have about $700 million in our rainy day account, our savings account. That's while we were able to actually balance the budget in our province, and it's also why we were able to reduce taxes again and make some investments in infrastructure and innovation. We've talked about those today. So we have to build caution in terms of those prices. But I'd posit this as well. Have the floors changed in terms of these commodity prices? I think that's an important question for us to answer. For example, on the potash side, things fell apart in terms of sales of Canadian potash in '09. But even at that, the price never touched what used to be the highs not very long ago. That's right. Yeah. They were $300 a ton.
That's right.
And I'd make the same case for oil. West Texas, in the middle of the recession, it touched just below 40, I think, for a while before it it basically climbed quite quickly. And so we still need to build caution into our budgeting, and we will. We still need to thinking about investing in this resource dividends to the government in the long term, in the next economy. But I do think there's been an adjustment in the floors for these commodity prices.
And Premier, we can't let you go without touching again on that fascinating battle for control of Potash Corp of Saskatchewan last year. There's a new majority government in place in Ottawa now. Perhaps some changes in terms of the foreign investment rules might be in the offing. Do you think those rules need to be changed? As a province with so many key resources and key companies, should they be more clearly defined? Would you change what you know about the foreign investment rules?
You know, perhaps there could be some adjustment, but you know, in hindsight now, we look at the metric used by the federal government of net benefit. It's quite a liberating measure to use from a provincial perspective, or as Canadians evaluating any particular deal. And we tried to do that. We analyzed the deal from using that terminology. Is there a net benefit to this takeover in terms of jobs, in terms of investment, or in terms of Canada's strategic position in the world? And you remember what our conclusion was. Now, could there be a little bit more detail around what net benefit might mean or what might constitute a strategic resource? Possibly. We would offer perhaps some counsel that in the case of our province, if you have either a company that's producing 20% of an important strategic resource like uranium, and we have that in Cameco, or if you have another company that has that much in reserve of a strategic asset, in the case of Potash Corporation more than that, those are probably unique. And we do want Canadian champions going forward. In a world that wants food security and energy security, Canada can be a leader. But we should desire some Canadian champions to affect that while having an environment that still welcomes foreign investment. And I do think those two things can balance.
How do you find that balance?
Well, I think, first of all, Canada struck that balance. It's been a rare occasion, really two, in contemporary history where the government's ever said no. Other than that, it's been a place that's been welcoming of foreign investment. But I think if the world understands that there are certain resources we have, in our case, uranium and potash, that might need to be treated a little bit differently, I think that understanding will help going forward. I should point this out, by the way. Cameco is a former Crown corporation that was privatized. It's already protected by the golden share that Ottawa holds, and we have one too in terms of the head office. So it's almost moot, but it's still a good example of where we produce 18% of something that's obviously quite strategic in the world, uranium.
And what about oil, natural gas, which is more broadly across the country, maybe not considered as strategic in terms of the concentration, but should there be greater or less control over those assets?
I think we've been well served by the policy with respect to the oil and gas industry in the country, and provinces and the federal government have been welcoming of investment. This is Canada is an energy power, an emerging energy power, and it's something we all ought to be proud of, whether we live in the oil-producing part of the country or not. And we can also be proud of the fact that we're a country that is working hard to reduce the environmental footprint around oil production, unlike most countries, frankly, that are major oil producers. So this is a source of pride for the country. We need to continue to grow this industry, make it more sustainable, and I think we need to be welcoming of investment to achieve that.
Premier, do you think the TMX Group is a national resource that needs protection?
We talked a little bit about it. I was on a trade mission in London and interviewed with BNN from there, and of course we were actually at the exchange. So that was the elephant in the room. And you know, it seemed to us at the time, and it would seem to be the case today, that there's certainly an accommodation for Canadian presence and the new board for the new structure. I'm not sure there would be a marked difference for the country in terms of its own wanting to have an influence, that sphere of influence that we'd want, an important thing like what is effectively the national exchange. So just on the surface of it, and we've said we're not going to get into the detail we did on Potash Corp as a government for obvious reasons. On the surface of it, we didn't see any particular problems emerging from that kind of an acquisition.
Premier, we'll leave it there. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
We're joined by Saskatchewan's Premier, Brad Wall.
And coming up next, Magna has a new chairman, and it's someone who's familiar to the people of Ontario.